Welcome to the Forge training program. Your mentor on this occasion is Alan Manford, and this is game one of a series. Alan is a bit of a specialist in the Queen's pawn opening, and he's just started, as you can see, with d4. Black has responded with d5. This is pretty standard stuff right at the beginning. The first 5 or 6 moves are pretty standard, no surprises. But as this game wears on, there are quite a few surprises, most of them unpleasant for black, as we will soon discover. White's played knight f3. You can expect knight f6, e3 and e6, as you see here. White will probably now play d3, bishop d3. Black will play knight c6, or he could play knight d7, which is probably a slightly better move insofar as it opens up the possibility of c4 or c5, sorry, c6 or c5. But however, he's chosen to play knight c6. It's not the worst move in the world. White's played c3. This is obviously to avoid the awkwardness of bishop b4 check, which can lead to difficulties. So he chooses to play c3. There's some very good additional reason for that, as we'll discover at a later point. Black has chosen to fianchetto his black bishop on g7. This is obviously to have a control over the long diagonal between h8 and a1. White has played his second bishop, that's his queen's bishop, to d2, sorry, and also black has played a6. White has now played knight a3. You might be asking why, and we'll find out why in a minute. So the position is fairly clear at the moment. There's no problem here. Black kingside castle, as you might have expected there. We usually tell our students are usually advised to castle as soon as it's convenient, but you have to sometimes be a little bit careful in rushing your castle. In this case, it's not a problem, as it happens. White has played h4, which is a premature move really, although we'll see why in a minute. Black plays the rather weakening move h5, but it's forgivable given the situation here. What was the alternative? There really wasn't a better move, I don't think. It just couldn't really allow the pawn to go to h5. I don't think that would have been good. Although I suppose the knight could have taken, but it would have been complicating, I'd say. Black plays b5. There's nothing wrong with that at all. It's a reasonable move. But White does the surprise queenside castle at this stage, and then plays knight g5, which is obviously a threat to the pawn on f7, potential threat anyway, and an attack on the h7 square equally. So that's quite a strong, powerful move defended by the pawn on h4. It's very obvious that White is now involved in a robust, powerful kingside attack, with black hardly having time to draw breath, as it were, in order to launch any kind of counter-attack on the queenside. Played knight. Black has played knight a5 with the obvious intention of going to c4 and attacking the bishop on d2. We'll see how successful he is in that aim in a minute. At this point, one would expect white to play e5, and he does, and the expectation would be that black would then play his knight to d7, which would have been a move that would have freed up his knight and strengthened the attack on the queen side. However, he chose to play the rather bizarre, if I may say that, knight g4, which opens up this sort of attack. F3 is played, obviously, force the knight back, and he can only go now back to, he has really very little choice, he has to go back to knight to h6, and he does. Clearly white is already has a very strong attack here, and this is all resulting from, I think, from black's failure to launch any sort of credible alternative attack on the queen side. He's wasting time, in other words, he plays knight f5 now, and you might say, well, that's him, he's safe enough now, but we'll see that he isn't, because white now plays that, which could have been anticipated, and actually taking the pawn with your h-pawn, the black's h-pawn will create more problems than it solves. So the knight is retreated to h6 again, time wasted, and black continues this fierce onslaught on the king side. The knight is now, black's knight is now placed on g5 with an attack on f7 and 7. So black thinks he has to get rid of this annoying knight, but he pays a heavy price, as we all see. He plays f6, and of course this is too easily attacked. However, the point of this attack by white will be seen very clearly in a minute, because he's quite happy actually for the knight to be captured, because he has a devastating reply to this, which you will see in a minute. Yeah, a pin on the rook. The rook is pinned against its queen. Black would have been better advised at an earlier point to move his rook to probably to d7. That would have been probably the wisest move at this stage. However, it's all too little too late, and white now has a very nice little attack there. Takes, of course, on the rook. What else would he do? Black has a bit of counterplay here, though. Look, you see it. He's played bishop h6 check. The king has to move here. The black king has to move. Which he does. But of course this opens up the check with the knight on d2, and as we will see at a later stage, that was actually what happened. The queen takes, of course, the bishop now, and the situation is roughly equal in terms of pieces, although, as I've said, black has an exchange down as a result of the pin by White's bishop. The question is, why has he moved his other rook onto g1? It's fairly obvious. First of all, it's an attack on the king indirectly, because the bishop can take the knight without recapture. But so the king has to move. However, he decides to move to h8, and it really wasn't the best idea, given that his king, the king side, is really being decimated here. It might have been more advisable to move to king f8, and any analysis that's been done since indicates that to be the case. It would certainly have prolonged the game, and would have given black a few more drawing chances, rather more drawing chances than he has at the moment. So it's pretty bleak looking at this moment, isn't it, for black. Now, queen is protecting the bishop on h7, and of course this opens up the G file with a horrible little nasty little attack now going for White against the embattled king, black king. This is the next surprise though. He immediately plays the rook, alright, which you might think is, well, it's fairly suicidal. He's going to lose his rook, and if the bishop takes back, he's going to lose his bishop as well. So you're maybe asking, why would he do that? We'll soon find out. Obviously the bishop takes the rook, but black wins the bishop. So we're now in a situation where black has 4 minor pieces, while white has the rook and the knight. So effectively, he's, to all intents, he's 2 pieces to the good. The trouble is, black doesn't capitalize on this. In fact, he blows his chances, as we'll soon discover. You might think he ought to move his king straight away. He doesn't do that. What he does is plays the bishop in front of to defend his king against the rook. And the question is, why is this not the best move? We'll soon find out. We'll soon discover, because now the bishop is no longer defending the knight. The knight is taken by the queen. This was overlooked by black. Bad mistake. So the deficit is now down to, three minor pieces versus rook and knight, and obviously the 2 queens still on the board. Black wins a compensatory pawn, despite his carelessness. However, what he's overlooked is the horrible, from his point of view, queen to g2. Now we have a mate, the loss of a piece and a mate in the offing. So black feels he has no alternative. He thrusts his queen in the way, defended by his knight, and obviously queen will take queen, knight will take queen, and rook will take knight, and that will be the situation from there on, with again with black with two minor pieces and the knight now and rook. So marginally, in terms of pieces, white is a point or two ahead, and also he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns, whereas black has only 5. So he's got he's 2 pawns ahead, plus an extra point or two for his rook against the minor pieces. So from a quite a really reasonable position, a playable position, black has lost the initiative and almost certainly lost the game. I think white prudently retracts his rook to g1, and that leaves us with black with 2 bishops, as I said, a rook and a knight. A rook and a knight for white, and it's almost certainly a run game. However, black makes an extraordinary move here, which black fails to capitalize on. Yeah, that's it. There is no way in which he shouldn't have captured the knight. There was no threat, because the king wasn't being threatened with mate or anything at that point. So, but instead of doing it, what's he going to do? He goes and plays f4. Sorry, c4. How bad is that? White must have thought Christmas had come early, because he now plays the obvious move, threatening the bishop, with knight on g4, threatening knight on f6, which is a really killer move, as we'll soon discover. Black has left his bishop, his white square bishop, too late into the game. White's bishop should have come into the game much earlier than this. Now there's no way it can go anywhere, and white has now played the fatal move, knight. Fatal move for black, that is. Knight f6 with mate to follow. Tragic, isn't it, to watch this and see what could have been done, what might have taken place, but we're left with almost a schoolboy mate, an elementary mate here, which no way should a black fallen for. As we were saying earlier, the real issue was that he chose to keep his king on the king's side when it was clearly open to very vulnerable, very open to attack. That was a big tactical mistake. So the tactical errors in this game are: number 1, failure to capitalize on the move, the queenside castle of the white, by launching some sort of fairly more aggressive attack on the queenside. The other tactical error was to allow his king side pieces to be basically obliterated, and worse than that, to allow his king to be trapped in the corner, on the king side corner, when there were open files, both on the G file and the H file were open to attack from white. Black will learn from this, hopefully, and not make the same mistakes again. That's the whole point of these exercises, of course. But it's surprising how, when you're in the middle of a game, it's all psychological. When you're in the middle of a game, you tend to, how shall I put it, stop looking at the game from both sides. And that's what you need to do. To win this sort of game, you need to be looking at the game from both sides, not from the opposition solely. Not looking at what you can do, but looking at what damage white can cause in the situation. And as I say, it's always easy to be wise after event. But looking at this game, one could have imagined that this game would have been extended, and that even with analysis by Chess Wizard, it would seem this game could have been prolonged, and perhaps a draw could have been manufactured, but not the way that black played it. Anyway, that's the end of that little spiel. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the game. Bye.